Okay, before I get into this little story that I have for you all, I have to apologize. What I read earlier was actually from 2 Corinthians chapter 3:18. I need to take better notes. I got a little story here to read. Then afterwards I'll have like 2 questions that you can answer to yourself. When our niece Savannah was very young, she explained to me what happens when you die. Only your face goes to heaven, not your body. You get a new body, but keep the same face. Savannah's concept of our eternal state was a child's understanding, of course, but she did grasp an essential truth in a sense. Our faces are our visible reflection of the invisible soul. My mother used to say that an angry look might someday freeze on your face. Hear that, so smile. She was wiser than she knew. A worried brow, an angry set to our mouth, a sly look in our eyes may reveal a miserable soul. In the other hand, kind eyes, a gentle look, a warm, welcoming smile, despite wrinkles, blemishes, and other disfigurements, like Scott, becomes mark of inner transformation. That's for last week. We can't do much about the faces we are born with, but we can do something about a kind of a person we're growing into. And I've always said that I don't care what somebody's background is. What I do care about a person is what they want to be today and what they want to be tomorrow. We can do something about the kind of persons we are growing into. We can pray for humility, patience, kindness, tolerance, gracefulness, forgiveness, peace, and love. By God's grace and in His time, may you and I grow toward an inner resemblance to our Lord, a likeness reflected in a kind of old face. Thus, as English poet John Donne said, age becomes loveliest at the last day, and I would say at the last minute. If you've ever been with somebody on the doorstep, you'll know what I'm talking about. The 2 questions I got for you that you can think about and answer to yourself is, how can you grow closer to God's likeness? Because He made man in His own image. So how can you grow closer to that image? And the second one would be, what will you do today to move towards that goal? So let's think about that and do something about it. I'll just say a little closing prayer. Jesus, I want to be more like you each day. Help me to cooperate with the work you want me to do in my heart. Amen. Thank you.
Okay, Alan, Dave, now you're up.
Dave had a song in his heart he wanted to do, and the Dave McBride.
Uh, 15 minutes before we pulled in, we had no idea where we were going to. We had no idea where we were going to church today. Wow, Hal lets me play his guitar. I don't play the pick. I don't know how to use that. He just said, "You got a song?" No, I didn't have a song. And I normally play sitting down, but as the coronavirus was coming around, I would wake up in the middle of the night and my hearing aids would tell me the battery's low. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and there would be like 3 or 4 praise songs would come to me. And I'd get up and write them down, or I'd wait until the next morning and I'd try to remember them. And so I got to the point, this won't fall off of me now, I don't want it to fall come. I got to the point where I had a whole page completely full of praise songs. And so I picked 4 real little short ditties, and as some of the churches were having, on the telephone and so forth, well, we did a few of those. So when Al asked me, the first thing that came to me was, "Oh Lord," the words are, "Oh Lord, you're beautiful. Your face is all I seek. And when your eyes are on this child, your love abides in me." So we'll do it one time. I don't know whether it would be loud enough for you to hear us. And then I'll play it again, and you sing along with us. "Oh Lord, you're beautiful. Your face is all I seek. And when your eyes are on this child, your love abides with me." Sing loud. Oh Lord, you're beautiful. Your face is all I see. And when your eyes are on this child, your love abides in me. Here we go. Oh Lord, you're beautiful. Your face is all I see. And when your eyes are on this child, your love abides in me. Thank you. That's nice to play great guitar.
Today I went back to the place where I used to go. Today I saw that same old crowd I knew before. When they'd asked me what had happened, I tried to tell them. Thanks to Calvary, I don't live there anymore. Yes, thanks to Calvary, I am not the man I used to be. Thanks to Calvary, things are different than before. And as the tears ran down my face, I tried to tell them, thanks to Calvary, I don't go there anymore. Then we went back to that old house where we used to live. My little boy, he ran and hid behind the door. I said, "Son, please don't be afraid. You've got a brand new daddy now." And thanks to Calvary, we don't live there anymore. Yes, thanks to Calvary, I am not the dad I used to be. Thanks to Calvary, things are different than before. And And as the tears ran down my face, I tried to tell them, thanks to Calvary, I don't live there anymore. Yes, thanks to Calvary, I don't live there anymore. If there ever was a time that I needed you before, Lord, I need you now. If there ever was a trial I couldn't handle on my own, is how this feels somehow. And if there ever was a child who was crying out for help, that's what this song's about. If there ever was a time I needed you before, Lord, I need you now. If I've ever had a friend who's always kept his word, Lord, I know it's you. Because there's never been a time where you've left me all alone or have been untrue. And if I know anything, it's that you'll always meet my needs just like you always do. And I'm leaning on your love, counting on your grace just to see me through. I need you to remind me how faithful you have been. And when I'm at my weakness, that's where your strength begins. If there ever was a time that I needed you before, Lord, I need you now. If there ever was a trial I couldn't handle on my own, that's how this feels somehow. And if there ever was a child who was crying out for help, that's what this song's about. If there ever was a time I needed you before, Lord, I need you now. Yes, if there ever was a time that I needed you, Lord, I need you now.
Thank you, Alan Dave. I've tried to speak loud enough so you can hear me. What was yesterday?
Saturday. Fireworks show.
Saturday, 4th of July fireworks show, Independence Day. What does Independence Day represent?
Freedom.
Freedom. That's what everybody thinks is freedom. And it does represent freedom. Freedom from what? So I'm gonna step, I won't have you answer that. So I'm gonna step away from the book of Hebrews today because of Independence Day. And I was thinking about independence and how does that work in the Christian life? And I thought, and independence doesn't work in the Christian life. So I'll try to explain myself. So I'll try not to lose you. So when they gained what did they sign? Declaration of Independence from who? Great Britain. Yes, Britain. Declaration of Independence. So they were a free nation. So were they free to do whatever they wanted to? No. So they were independent from Great Britain, but they still had to be dependent on the rule of law and the government of the 13 colonies, which was legislated by the Continental Congress. So they were independent from Great Britain, but they still had to be dependent on the colonies. Otherwise, it would be just total chaos. So, what is sin?
Anything contrary to God's will.
And it'll separate you from God. Separation from God. So I want to go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. So this is God speaking to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and every living creature that moves on the ground." And the other scripture is Genesis 9, verses 1. Verses 1. This is after the flood. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth." So in both situations, God said, "Scatter. You have been made in my image. I've created the earth. Scatter and show my image all over the earth and enjoy my creation. Just go. Scatter and fill the earth. I have blessed you with a beautiful place." So what, do you remember what God told Abraham when he was comfortable in his home and family? He said, "Go." Where did he tell him to go? He didn't tell him where to go. He said, "Go." And what did Abraham do? He went. He left. And he continued to go until God said, "This is it." So now I want to go to Genesis 11:4. So remember, God said, "Go. Scatter. All over the face of the earth. Reproduce. Bless the earth. Enjoy my creation." Genesis 11:4. Oops, that's Exodus. Sorry. Genesis 11. I don't know why I have verse 4. We'll start at verse 1. The Tower of Babel. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building, and the Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it's called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the earth. So, I was thinking about independence and how that works in the Christian life, and I don't see how independence works in the Christian life. And so I started listening and watching and reading, and I come across Dr. Tony Evans. I don't know if any of you know who he is, but he is a phenomenal speaker. And he actually stated that independence is a sin. That's weird. We grow our children up to be independent from us, to go work hard and make their own family and produce their own wealth and buy their own house. Everything is built on making them good, strong, independent people. So how can independence be a sin? Because that looks right. That's what we think we're supposed to do. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, because that is one of our duties. But the people in the book of Genesis started on their journey. They started following God. They said, go fill the earth, and they headed off. And what happened? I'm tired of following God. I'm ready to stop. And not only am I ready to stop, I'm going to stop right now. I am going to stop what God asked me to do. I am declaring my independence from His rule of law and His leading and His guiding and His lordship. That's what the Americas did to Great Britain. They seen Great Britain, King George, as a tyrant, and how he was oppressing the people, and how he was using the people, and how he was taxing the people, and how they didn't have any representation. And if you go read the Declaration of Independence, it'll tell you all the things that King George did. And so the colony says, I declare independence. I am done with that rule of law. I'm done with that king. I'm no longer going to follow that. The people in Genesis did the same thing. They said, I'm done. We're not going to scatter anymore. We are going to claim independence from what God is telling us to do. And so what did they do? They said, we want to build a city. A city. So if you think of a city, what does a city have?
Rules.
Rules. Yes, that's right. They have a governing body. So they would have a capital or a town hall. They would have a governing body to make rules and regulations within the city. So let's build a city. Let's build a tower. Let's build a tower. Have you ever built a tower? Oh yeah. You don't answer. So how does this pertain to us? We didn't stop. We didn't build a city. We didn't build a tower. Have you ever stopped and built a career? Stopped and to build your reputation? To build your finances? To build your home? Cars, your family? Whose rule of law did you base that on? What did you follow when you were building all that? I have done that. That's actually my testimony. I stopped. Everything that I learned, everything that my parents raised me up to do, to build my own little city, to institute my own little law in my governing forces and how we're going to do this as a family, what we will do, what we won't do. What we're going to use our money for. And you know what? It was going good. And if you read the Tower of Babel, it was going good for them as well. They were getting it built. Things were looking good and everything was coming together. And then what did God do? He come and gently tapped them on the shoulder. The people said, we're going to make a name for ourselves. Is that how it works? Where did Abram get his name? Who was Abram turned into? What was his new name? Abraham. God give him that name. What about Jacob? His parents give him his birth name. What's his new name? Israel. Who gave him his name? Israel. God did. What about Jesus? Who gave Jesus his name? God did. These people said, I want to make a name for myself. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to declare my independence, and I'm going to do things my way. I know what's best. And God said, I told you to scatter and fill the earth. And so what did God do? He made them speak all different languages and caused confusion. Caused confusion. And then what happened? They scattered. And so, the reason I found this so interesting is when I think of confusion, when I think of the world today and how nothing makes sense, I always think Satan's involved. Satan is doing this. It's all Satan's fault. What if it's God trying to redirect us? What if that confusion is truly coming from God to redirect us back on the right path? See, when I think of Satan, I think that's a battle that's already done. God will take care of it. It'll all turn out in the end. But what if it's God confusing us to lead us back to the path we were directed to go? That's a different story. Because if I sit back and stay idle, or I'm fighting against the devil, when truly it's God leading us or directing us. Does any of you have any confusion in your life? Does any of you, are any of you, building your own little city? See, the people at Babel built from the ground up. If we were truly following God, where does our instruction come from? But like I said, things were looking really good for a while. Things were were panning out just the way they thought. Things are going good. We're getting it built up. It's starting to look good, and we're coming together as a community. And my life is getting put together. Me and my wife was working. We were starting to get nice vehicles. We had a home, and things were just like I had planned, just like in my head the rule of the clean kingdom was coming to fruition. And then, most of you know, Dustin was killed in an accident. That's not part of the clean government, the clean city, the rules and regulations of the city. That don't. How does that work? Well, if this can happen now, how am I going to control anything in the future? If I don't have control over protecting my family, how is this ever going to work? And so I was in a little state of confusion. I didn't understand. And I don't want to say that God did that. I'm saying it happened. And God used it. I'll definitely say God used it. But in that confusion, I started to be redirected from where I came from in the path that my parents had put me on, in the path that God put me on. And I was redirected back to dependence on God. Because independence, we think of as freedom. When we think of freedom, you think of a slave being released. Yes, that's I can go do what I can walk out in the yard. I can walk down the road whenever I want to. I can eat whenever I want to. I don't have to be locked behind doors anymore. But true freedom always entails structure. Because if there's no structure, there's just total chaos. And so we have to be dependent on something. In God's law, we don't like to talk about God's law too much. We like to talk about Jesus died on the cross and we're good. But we don't want to talk about following God's law too much. We don't want to talk about following his system, following Jesus' teaching, because it's hard. I don't want to scatter. I want to just sit down, build a house, and live here comfortably. I don't want to scatter. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to go through the desert. I don't want to go through the mountains. I just want to build me a city and live here and be comfortable. I want to do whatever I want, whenever I want. The problem is when you feel that way, you think of absolutely no one else. I become selfish when I started achieving all my things. When everything was coming to just like I had it planned out, I become selfish, self-centered. Do everything that in my power to make sure me and my family was happy. Jesus died on the cross to give us hope of a future. That Jesus came to live on the earth to teach us how to live and love perfectly. True freedom if you go to John 8, John 8, verses 31 through 36. This is Jesus speaking. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you hold my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants, and we've never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? Jesus replied, I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Where does that freedom come from? From the teachings and following the teachings. That is being dependent on the life of Jesus and the Word of God. The Bible study this morning was pretty, I don't know how to say it. It was pretty heavy for me. So when you sin, when you separate yourself from God's rule of law, you separate yourself from God's rule, from God's love, from God, who He is. When you are separated from Him, who are you pleasing now? Satan. You cannot, if you think you are truly independent, you are truly free to do whatever you want, that is a scheme of Satan. You are falling right into his trap because you are falling right exactly what he is deceiving you to do. Independence. When we became independent of Great Britain, America was the greatest place on earth. When and if you declare your independence from this world and claim your dependence on Jesus Christ, you will have the greatest life you have ever had. And you will be under the authority of a God who knows perfectly how to handle every situation. How to get you through any and all situations. These unspoken requests and healings and cancers and financial problems and relational problems and all that. God's rule of law and how Jesus taught us to love people will get you through all of that perfectly. You will have a sense of peace. You may even have a sense of joy. But please, don't ever declare your independence. Don't separate yourself from God's kingdom. It's easy to do in this world. It's easy to stake a claim anywhere you want to stop. The church, I was talking about the church. The way I feel right now with this COVID-19, I feel like I just stopped. I feel like I'm just trying to get through every day or every week. If I make it through that week, good for me. But God still has a plan through all of this. God has direction for all of us. There is still a purpose that God has through all of this. And it's never changed. Go and make disciples. Love me. Love everybody else. And the greatest command, love yourself, right? Make sure yourself is happy first. Make sure you're comfortable before you go out and do this. Make sure you're at peace. Make sure you have no pain. Make sure you're financially fit to go do this. And then go do it. In and amongst everything that we're going through as individuals. Satan is going to be trying to deceive you into making your independence from God. And he's good at it. He's really, really good at it. We was talking about in the study this morning, you have to be prepared for the attack Satan has. You have to be able to sense Satan. You have to know good from evil. You have to know whether it's God's leading or Satan's deception. If you can't identify your enemy, you can't fight your enemy. And your enemy will consume you. And your enemy is good. Your enemy is smart and intelligent. So Independence Day, we do live in the greatest country. We can come out here in the middle of a yard and worship whenever we want. We can have a cookout whenever we want. We can talk about anything we want. We can be anybody we want to be. But freedom doesn't mean you can do whatever you want because Jesus did it all. Jesus took care of it. I don't have to do anything. So this week, be prayerful about your own journey and this church. What's our next step? How can we fulfill the Great Commission? How can we truly love God to the best of our ability and love the community around us? How can we serve people? What's our next step? Because it seems like COVID is just sinking everybody deeper and deeper into a hole. Let's pray. God, I know you haven't given up on anybody. I know you haven't walked away from anybody. I know that you still love us completely and wholly. One of the greatest things about living in America is we can get whatever we want, anytime we want. And God, unfortunately, that kind of is one of our biggest downfalls because we don't see a need for you. What do we need God for? We have everything that we have. We have everything that we need. And if we don't have it, we can get it. God, with everything that's going on right now, I pray that you would help us to identify the enemy. But I also pray that if this state of confusion that the United States is in, the disruption that's going on, that if that's you, I pray that we find our way back. I pray that we understand what it is you're trying to show us and what we need to do. To show and share the love of your Son, Jesus. To give hope. To give hope to people that feel like no one loves them. No one cares about them. Nobody understands them. You say, if we ask for wisdom, you'll give it freely. But a lot of times we don't ask for anything because we're concerned that you'll give it to us. And you ask us to go out into our communities, to go out in our state, to go out in our continent, and go out into the world and share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Help us to do that. Give us the strength and the courage to take the next step. Give us the courage to step into the Jordan before you stop the waters. God, you are a good God, and thank you for never giving up on us. I pray that we would start seeing more clearly how we can love our neighbors, how we can love our friends and our family right and perfectly, so that they can see your reflection through us. Thank you, God. Thank you for your Son, Jesus, who took the time to teach us. And who curled up on that cross to die for us. And now stands as our high priest. Thank you for all you've done for us and all you're doing for us. And I pray this week that we can be a blessing to people. And that they see you through it. I pray all these things in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.